Do you guys remember last week's lesson? We talked about Jesus as our rock. And then we go, what is a rock? What's a stone? What's a pebble? Do you remember that from last week? Well, some of you do. But if you don't, what is a rock again? And what's a stone? Is solid mineral material. It's just solid mineral material in the ground or a planet. And then what's a pebble? A pebble is just a small rock or stone. So I showed you a few rocks and stones last week. We showed some manganese, and then we showed you some crystals that you can find in Arizona. I'm going to show you a few more. Now, right over here, these are, if you look inside here, these are gemstones. And what's a gemstone? They're like those really sparkly stones. Like, see the purple one there? That's amethyst. That's from Arizona. And then this is like a smoky quartz over here. See that one there? And then there's some rubies inside here. And sapphires. These are known as gemstones. Aren't they pretty? Now I'm going to turn this light off for a second. See how pretty those stones are? So gemstones are what you normally will see rings built or made out of. And then you have these guys. I'm going to put that right there. It's in a basket, so it's not going to hurt the gemstones. It looks like a rose, doesn't it? It is. This is a rock. It's called a desert rose. You can get this in Arizona if you look on the ground, of course. You got to look down. I actually got this one from New Mexico. And these black stones in here, that's coal. You've heard of coal before. This is coal. So let's take them off the gemstones and let's come this way. So last week, we talked about Jesus is our rock. We're going to continue that. So let's come back in. So a rock is solid material, mineral material, that doesn't break. It's solid. So let me show you a couple more rocks. See this here? That looks like a rock, doesn't it? And look at the other side. It's sparkly. This isn't a rock. This is called petrified wood. It's actually a fossil. So this is a fossil that looks like a rock, and it's really heavy. That's actually wood that turned to stone. See this simple rock? By the way, that petrified rock, or the petrified wood, it's from Arizona. But you see this guy? This white stone? It's called milk quartz. Milk. Because it's white, obviously. So this is milk quartz, and you can find this all over Phoenix. It's everywhere. Now let's come over here. See this rock? See how it's orange in some places? I got this on the top of a volcano. So I hiked a volcano in Guatemala, and I got this rock on the top of a volcano. Now, that petrified wood is really heavy. It's solid. And this milk quartz is pretty heavy. It's a solid rock too. But this volcanic, lava rock, it's really light. Now let's look at this. It doesn't look like much, does it? But if you look at it closely, it's blue. This is called azurite. And azurite is also found in Arizona. Actually, Arizona has the best azurite in the world. You can find this in southern Arizona. But this rock, it's pretty solid. It's a solid rock. It's not as solid as that petrified wood, that fossil. So let's go over to this. Here's another one. Doesn't look like much, does it? It's a piece of quartz here, just a clear quartz crystal, but see how it's purple at the tip? Last week I showed you manganese. If you take manganese And a white crystal like this, it makes amethyst. So that amethyst stone that we saw in the other room, it's basically a white crystal mixed with manganese to make it this purple. And God made this beautiful pointed purple amethyst here. And you can find this in Arizona. Actually got this on the top of a mountain in Arizona. Now I'm going to show you this rock. This is more of a crystal. It looks kind of blue, doesn't it? This is called celestite. Some people call it celestine. If I put some light on it, see how beautiful that is? That beautiful blue stone crystal. This is celestite. So let's put that down for a second. So what do you guys think about when you hear the word rock? Well, let's go to the Bible first before I ask you that question again, because I'm going to ask you again. And so we're going to go in the book of Matthew. And in the book of Matthew, we're going to go to chapter 7. But don't look at my Bible yet. We're going to do this. On my board, I wrote Matthew's chapters 5 through 7. In the Bible, that's called Sermon on the Mount. Okay, say it together, everybody. It's the Sermon on the Mount. So when you ever hear about the Sermon on the Mount, that's the sermon that Jesus gave up on this mountain area. It's in Matthew chapters 5 through 7. And what happened on the Sermon on the Mount is Jesus sat down and he taught a lot of people. He taught about a lot of stuff. He talked about murder, don't murder people and kill people. He talked about divorce, and he was teaching people on the Mount. It's called the Sermon on the Mount. But then he told this one story. He told a story about two builders. That's the story we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about the two builders. And it's in Matthew chapter 7. And we'll look at my Bible in a second. But I still want to ask you that question. What do you think about when you hear the word rock? Rock. What do you think about? I think of something that's really hard, because a rocket can be hard. Kind of like this fossil that went from a piece of wood to a rock. That is really hard. Or this piece of milk quartz. That's hard. That's a hard rock. So I think of something that's firm, something that's not going to break, something that never is going to shake, because rocks are solid. So let's go to our story about the two builders. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get up and I'm going to walk toward the camera. So we're going to be in Matthew chapter 7. But before we get to Matthew chapter 7, I was talking about the Sermon on the Mount. Now, the Sermon on the Mount starts from chapter 5 in Matthew, and it goes all the way through. This is Jesus talking in red, all the way through chapter 7. So I wrote a lot. I have a lot of things marked up in my Bible on the Sermon on the Mount. But what we're going to talk about is right here where it says, the two foundations. So that's what Jesus was talking about when he was still talking about the two builders. So I'm going to read Matthew chapter 7, verses 24 through 27. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read it off this, because that's too small for me right now. So I wrote it a little bit bigger over here. So Matthew 7:24 says, just as Jesus speaking now, whoever hears these teachings, now you remember he's up on the mount, he's teaching. So Jesus says, whoever hears these teachings of mine and obeys them is like a wise man who builds his house on rock. So Jesus is saying, if you listen to me, and if you want to be a really smart, wise man, it's like a guy who builds his house on rock, solid rock. Verse 25 says, it rained hard, the floods came, and the winds blew and beat against that house. But it did not fall because it's built on rock. So if you want to be a wise man or girl, you want to build your house on rock. So you listen to Jesus' teachings and you obey him. It's like a wise person who builds his house on rock. Now, verse 26 of Matthew chapter 7 says this. Jesus says, whoever hears these teachings of mine and does not obey is like a foolish man who builds his house on sand. So if you build a house on sand, what's going to happen? Because sand isn't as solid as rock, is it? No. Sand kind of moves. So then Jesus says on verse 27 of Matthew 7, he goes, it rained hard, the floods came, the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell with a loud crash. So Jesus is saying, build your house on him. He's that rock. So sometimes when you think of rock now, think of Jesus. Jesus is that solid rock. He's that firm foundation that doesn't move and shift, that doesn't sway when the wind blows. Jesus is that solid rock. He's that foundation. So, I'm going to ask that question again. What do you think about when you hear the word rock? Well, it's that solid material, but it's also Jesus. Jesus is that solid rock. And you know what? You know I'll see you next time.